Hello, friends. I'm Chris. I'm from Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness. Welcome to our free public wellness talk. Don't tell me to relax. Befriending and managing your nervous system. This talk was originally recorded at a live session through Zoom on Saturday, November 20th, 2021, and I'm anticipating this will maintain as content on one or more of my platforms, at least until the best available information that I have has changed. We'll get started here in just a moment. But as you know, I'm Chris. I'm from Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness. And just so grateful for you guys for joining us for a free wellness talk. Don't tell me to relax. So, this is going to be a talk on befriending and managing your autonomic nervous system. So, I'd like to start, if we could, with three cleansing breaths. So you can do this. If it feels safe, you can close your eyes down. If that doesn't feel okay, leave your eyes open. But draw in a deep, life-affirming breath, and then open your mouth. Let the breath go. Make a ha sound. Let's do two more just like that. Inhale, big, dignified inhale, and let that go. Ah. And then one more time, deep, deep inhale. Exhale, let it go. Ah. I'm going to pull up some slides, but I think this is a universal experience. But let me frame it just in case. The circumstance where you're in a situation, it feels difficult at the time. Maybe afterwards it looks like it really was, or maybe it looks different. Whether or not later you felt like your reaction was in proportion to the circumstance or not doesn't really matter. But then you have someone come up and tell you, "Hey, relax." Um, if you've had that happen, just yes or no in the chat box type. Let me know if you've experienced that, and then I've got a follow-up question to that. Yes, so many times. Yeah, same. Was it helpful? That's my follow-up question. Yeah, and Sonia's got her hand up too. When they came up and they told you just relax, was it helpful?
No, not at all.
Yeah, it pisses me off. Don't tell me to relax. Tell me how to relax. If somebody's going to tell me something like that, tell me how. It's not helpful. And I also have to own that I've been in a situation where I've gone to other people that were freaking out and said, "Hey, relax." Um, Maybe taking it a step forward, take a breath, but also in that circumstance for that person, probably not helpful, probably not what they've needed. So I've been on both sides of this. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is when we're in that situation, because sometimes we notice this in ourselves, we see it in ourselves, and we go, I just need to relax, but we're not necessarily taught how to relax. With the tools that we're given, often we wouldn't consider to be very organic or wholesome. They come with side effects that maybe we wouldn't choose. So over the next 45 minutes to an hour, I'm going to distinguish between stress, eustress, and distress. I'm going to talk about the nervous system in general, but specifically the autonomic nervous system and the activation of the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. I'll describe the physiological effects of stress, and I'm going to share at least two actionable practices that we can use to self regulate the autonomic nervous system organically. We'll do a question and answer session, and then I'm going to give just a brief overview, 3 to 5 minutes at most, on my 12-month Ayurvedic health coaching program, Next Level Human. All right, so before I start, if you would, write in the chat box, what are your assumptions about the role of stress in your life? Like when somebody says stress to you, what do you think about? And I don't have any expectations here, friends. There's no right answers, as they say. Unhealthy, for sure it can be, Sonia. Yeah, work related, Casey, and unavoidable. Yeah, like life is going to put us in circumstances that stress us, and it can stress us in ways that are productive and useful for us, or in ways that really are not what we needed in that situation. So to that end, I wanted to talk just for a minute about the difference between stress, eustress, and distress. So stress is really intended. We don't use it as neutral in terms of value. Usually, we mean when we say stress, we mean distress. But stress is intended as a pretty neutral term. It's a specific response of the body to a stimulus that affects the state of the nervous system homeostasis or balance. So this is something that comes up in our lives that affects the balance of the nervous system. Can you think of a circumstance where you've had stress come up in your life that was useful, that helped you in a way, that was productive? And if so, can you put an example in the chat box? And if not, no pressure, friends. I literally volunteered to share with you. You didn't volunteer to share with me. Yes, fleeing actual danger, right? We're going to talk about sympathetic nervous system response, the distress that creates. We have that from an evolutionary standpoint. We have that for a reason. And although the way it manifests for most of us now is very different than it did for our ancient ancestors, we still have circumstances come up where we are physically in danger. And yeah, that's exactly right. What's another example of stress that came up that was helpful? I will tell you for me, it's deadlines, right? There are lots of times where I have something that I really want to do, especially service oriented, to produce something that I know is going to help someone. But there are I have lots of excuses and lots of reasons why doing it right now isn't going to be like, I don't need to do this right now because I've got other things to do. By the way, there's this new Marvel series that's on Disney Plus, right? That seems pretty important right now. Um, Having a timeline, knowing that there's a date and a deadline, puts a degree of stress on me that's really productive. I do really good work when I have a deadline and I know that something's due for me. So this would be called eustress. So this is a moderate or a normal psychological stress that we would interpret as being beneficial to us. Contrast that with distress, and that's a high psychological stress that we would interpret as being negative or harmful to the recipient, in this case, us. So let's look at an overview of the nervous system. Right, so I want to give you just a broad overview first, and we're really going to focus in on the kind of the center and the right where it says autonomic neurons. The central nervous system, this is the communication system. This is the electrical communication system in the body, the nervous system. And the central nervous system is the processor. It's the central processing unit. So it's our brain and it's our spinal cord. So here, this particular diagram has the job of the neutrons, these electrical impulses that are going back and forth. Afferent, what that means on the left-hand side between central nervous system and the sensory input, this is when we experience something in our sense organs. The afferent neurons take that, communicate that back to the central nervous system. And on the other side, the efferent neurons are when something's being communicated from the central nervous system out to the peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system can be broken down into two divisions. One is sensory, which I mentioned. So for the example, we feel something crawling on us and we look down and there's a spider, right? So we've got the sensory input of the feeling of the crawling, but also of seeing that. So the efferent neurons go to the central nervous system and say, "There's, we got a spider on us right now," and then the central nervous system communicates that. So the motor division is the other division of the peripheral nervous system, and this too we can break down into two divisions. One is somatic motor neurons, the somatic motor division. This is like our conscious decision to move muscles. This is when we're moving muscles. And then the autonomic nervous system, which is more or less subconscious. It responds less to conscious thoughts. So it's within this, the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system that really affect what I want to talk about today, the stress. Enteric nervous system is on this diagram, very interesting, but beyond the scope of this talk. This is our gut. Like if somebody says, what does your gut tell you about this when you're trying to make a decision? We're making a reference to the enteric nervous system, but that's a topic for another talk. So for now, what I'd like to talk about is the autonomic nervous system. So a really nerdy way for me to kind of convey this is if you look like a lot of good stories have two characters, they really complement each other well, and they have really different traits and qualities, and the story would be incomplete without them. So they don't exactly cancel each other out. In literature, characters like this in a story, they're known as foils. So in Star Trek, and a great example of foils are Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. So Captain Kirk is the captain of the Starship Enterprise, and he's always looking for a fight. He's always seeing these things coming up, and he sees everything as a threat, and he overreacts. But it's so he's our sympathetic nervous system, but it's the calm Vulcan logic of Mr. Spock slowing things down and saying, "Well, let's look at what we actually have going on here, and let's talk about that." Jim, what you're talking about isn't logical. So in this metaphor, Mr. Spock would be our parasympathetic nervous system. So within the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system's job is to respond to stress or a threat. Its primary role is reacting, responding to what's happening right here, right now. And the parasympathetic nervous system's job is to respond to everything else. So if we look at the sympathetic nervous system response, what are your body's response to stress? And it could be stress in general, but I'm most interested in the distress, what could have a negative, you would perceive this kind of stress as negative. How does your body respond to this? And if you could put that in the chat box, like wanting to scream, and it could be more than one thing, friends. It's certainly multiple things in my body. Sweating, yes, for sure. Body temperature increases. Kite jaw, shoulders, elevated heart rate for sure. Yep, you both said elevated heart rate. Um, yeah, it's exactly right. So lots of physical functions in the body that manifest in different ways in our lives. For example, when I'm under a big load of stress, sometimes I don't know it in the moment, and the first real clue that I have is my sleep dries up. When my sleep goes away, that's a pretty good clue for me that things I need to do something to change the equation in my favor. So our Captain Kirk activation, sympathetic nervous system. This is our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. So blood is shunted to the kind of areas that you would think that we would need it to respond to some kind of a threat. It goes to the brain, it goes to the heart, the lungs, the large muscles, the things that we would need to either run away from something or to fight. And it's pulled away from things like our guts. Like we don't need to be digesting in that moment. Pupils dilate, so our vision can get really clear in front of us. Peripheral vision tends to shut down. And the sympathetic nervous system activation is vasoconstricting, so the blood vessels get smaller. So what you guys identified, body temperature increases, we often sweat, pulse rate increases, blood pressure increases, and the adrenals start to release hormones so that we're prepared for whatever this dire threat is that comes up. In a life and death situation, what I think of as what our ancient ancestors, maybe under assault of a saber-toothed tiger, this is a really useful tool. The sympathetic nervous system, we needed that to survive. And like you guys said, we still have things that come up in our lives that are clear and present danger and threats to our safety and our well-being in this moment. We need the sympathetic nervous system response. But my question for you, and again, I will ask you to put this in the chat box, how does the sympathetic nervous system distinguish between these clear and present danger threats, like the saber-toothed tiger, I'm under attack by a saber-toothed tiger, or another stress, like I just said something really thoughtless and careless to a friend of mine, and I'm overthinking and worried about what she's thinking about me and if I hurt her feelings. How does the sympathetic nervous system distinguish between those um, two stimuli? What are your thoughts? And you may know this already. I'm kind of setting you up. It's a little bit of a trick question. Casey, that's right. Yeah, environment and context, right? That's our Spock. That's our parasympathetic nervous system response trying to balance things out, maybe. But most of the time, it doesn't distinguish it well at all. And from the standpoint of our physiology, the sympathetic nervous system response is the same whether it's a saber-toothed tiger. We're driving. We almost had another vehicle hit us. We're under a deadline at work that was not reasonable when it was given to us. We just said something foolish and dismissive to a friend and we're overthinking and worried about it. Like our body responds to all those things in the same way. So while this kind of sympathetic nervous system activation is really useful when we're under assault by a saber-toothed tiger, on these other times, because these things come up for us often every day, right? And if you think about the high blood pressure, the vasoconstriction, and the sympathetic nervous system response is inherently inflammatory. It causes inflammation in the body. So if you think about it from that standpoint, it would be nice to have some tools to change that when it's not the saber-tooth tiger. Right, and this brings us to Mr. Spock. This is our parasympathetic nervous system activation, and this is our the rest and digest division of our sympathetic nervous system. And a lot of it's really, you might think of these as opposite qualities of what we get with sympathetic nervous system activation and what will we need when we're trying to rest, relax, and digest. So instead of vasoconstricting, we have vasodilation. The blood vessels expand. So we have a decrease in heart rate. We have a decrease in blood pressure. There's an increase in the production and the release of bile. Same thing with saliva. So the things that we would need to rest and to relax. So to that end, one hack that we would need that we have that a lot of people don't necessarily know about. I was like, it wasn't until I started practicing yoga that I first heard about the vagus nerve. But this is a tool that we can use to hack that parasympathetic nervous system response. So if you would in the chat box, if you are very familiar with the vagus nerve, you know basically what it is and basically what it does for us. Type a zero. If you've heard of it, but don't know much about it, type a one. If this is all ancient Greek to you, never heard of it before, type a two. And again, friends, there are no right answers. One. Okay, awesome. So heard of it, not super familiar. One. Yep, two ones. Okay, awesome, guys. So there are 12 cranial nerves, and the vagus nerve is the 10th, and it has a role in regulating all these core functions that affect, like we need them to live, but they also, like we these are really impactful in our health. So things like body temperature, the rate of our heartbeat, and the heart function, decrease in pressure, satiation signals. So once we've eaten something, sending messages to the rest of the body, to the brain that's enough. We've had enough to eat, and now it's time to stop and digest that. Decreasing inflammation. Let me come back to that in a moment. The vagus nerve also has a role in mediating stomach acidity, blood sugar, water and sodium balance, and a lot of fluid productions like saliva, tears, and bile. So given what the parasympathetic nervous system activation looks like, no surprise that the vagus nerve's role is so impactful. I've been obsessed for the last 4 to 6 months with inflammation, and in particular, chronic systemic inflammation. So anything that decreases inflammation to me is really interesting, and I want to know more about it. Um, my teacher, Kate Stillman, she's my Ayurveda teacher. She's my business coach as well. She says that like if we have too much in the body, we take in too much food, um, we have inflammation. Or if we take in too much through our eyes and our ears, we have too much inflammation. But if we're in sympathetic nervous system activation, if the autonomic nervous system is elevated too much, that's inflammatory in nature too, and that will hurt us. So I would make the argument that most of what I would consider to be the boogeyman illnesses of our time are inflammatory in nature. So if you would, in the chat box, write a couple of examples that come to mind of what something that you think of as either a boogeyman illness of our time or an illness that's really common that's inflammatory in nature. And I've got a list, but I'd like to make this as interactive as we can. Whoops. Heart disease, for sure. Coronary heart disease, yep, is inflammatory in nature. For sure it is. Diabetes, arthritis, both inflammatory in nature. I would add to this list cancer, obesity, um, Alzheimer's disease, autoimmune disorders. They all have the root, like one of the common factors in terms of root causes that all of these have in common is chronic systemic inflammation. How people responded to um, COVID-19. If people got contracted COVID-19, their response, how sick they got or how not sick, the way the symptoms expressed had a lot to do with the level of has a lot to do with the level of chronic systemic inflammation in our bodies. So this is really important. If you look at this diagram, everything yellow is vagus nerve, right? So vagus is Latin for wandering. And it's a huge nerve. It starts at the brain, but goes all the way down into the gut. Right? So if we want to use the vagus nerve as a hack or a shortcut cut into autonomic nervous system management, some of the things that the vagus nerve responds really well to are slow rhythmic breathing. So if you think about that good, that peaceful, calm, euphoric feeling at the end of a good yoga class, part of what that is, not all of what that is, but part of what that is the vagus nerve's response to the breath. That breath is vagal toning. Vagal toning is just a term. It means the vagus nerve's ability to effectively respond to stimuli in the environment, to not under respond, to not over respond, but to come in right on track. So slow rhythmic breathing is impactful in the vagus nerve. Manual massage is really impactful in the vagus nerve. Also, medical stimuli. There are some devices that are given by physicians where people can either use them on the outside of their body and they'll massage the vagus nerve, but there are also implants that people can get. So I don't actually know anyone that's had this done, but I read about people who have had like really bad clinical depression, and they've tried therapy and they've tried medication, they've tried breathing, they've tried every tool that they knew that they had at their disposal, and nothing seemed to help. And then they got this device implanted in their neck that stimulates the vagus nerve, and they finally feel like themselves again, right? So, pretty amazing response from the vagus nerve. So, one of the things, like given what we talked about with um, the autonomic nervous system, it would be really easy to look at the sympathetic nervous system as bad and parasympathetic nervous system as good. But just like the Starship Enterprise needed both Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock to be healthy, whole, and complete, like they wouldn't have been able to respond to adversity without Captain Kirk, and they would have overreacted or responded to things that weren't adversity, treated them as threats without Mr. Spock. Um, our our wholeness needs both sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system response in some of the ways that we talked about, but also in some really mundane ways. So if you think about like when we're sleeping, most of the time, hopefully, we're in a parasympathetic nervous system response. To get up in the morning, if we don't have some level of sympathetic nervous system activation, we're probably never going to get out of bed again. So it comes up in our lives all the time. For us to be able to relax and go to sleep, we have to have that autonomic nervous system response. Um, like we're all grown folks, so this is going to be a grown folk comment, but like uh, sexual intercourse, we people have to be relaxed. There has to be a parasympathetic nervous system activation in order for people to feel arousal and have that healthy, whole, complete part of a gratifying part of a human relationship. But orgasm is not possible through just parasympathetic nervous system response. There has to be that sympathetic nervous system element. So this comes up over and over again in our lives. We need both of these, and we need tools to be able to activate all of these. What I'm going to focus on for tools is parasympathetic nervous system. Now, there are tools that we can use to activate the sympathetic nervous system. I can share some of those with you, but it's not the topic of tonight's uh, talk because that's not what's hurting people most of the time. That being said, if you want some breath work to help activate sympathetic nervous system, let's talk afterwards and I'll share some tools with you. If you would type in the chat box, what are common habitual tools that in our society we use to manage the autonomic nervous system, to either activate the sympathetic nervous system or activate the autonomic nervous system? And these are like, this is not, there's no judgment here, friends, because we all do some or all of these. Alcohol, cannabis, for sure, for sure. Yep, that's right. Drugs, yep. Coffee. I would argue that coffee, sugar, and alcohol are energy drinks. Caffeine, well, let's add caffeine to the list. Caffeine, alcohol, and sugar are all powerful drugs that are legal for most people in our society. And so we use them, right? And like with the cannabis, um, it's not a legal drug right now. Of course, eventually it will be. Why alcohol is legal and cannabis is not makes no sense to me. But I'm like, they didn't ask me. This is just what the law is right now. So part of my point here is I don't think it's wrong for us to have a cup of coffee if we can do it in moderation. We can do it in a controlled way. I don't think it's wrong for us to have a sugary snack if we can do it in moderation and in a controlled way. Same thing with alcohol and cannabis. Like for me, if I drink a beer tonight, I'm going to wake up in a ditch tomorrow. But I know that about myself, so I'm not going to do that, right? I learned that about myself a long time ago. But that's not the case with a lot of people. A lot of people can use those responsibly. But what I would argue is that these tools, when we use them to manage our autonomic nervous system, sometimes we use them in excess, and they do all come with trade-offs and side effects that sometimes are not what we want, are not what we want at all. So I want to share with you some other tools that we can possibly do. So for this first vagal toning practice, we're gonna work through a vagal nerve self massage, or I'm gonna show you, and you can choose to work through it or not. Give me just a second, and I'm gonna transition the audio. I'm gonna have to stop the share for this. All right, can you guys still hear me? Okay, awesome. Right, so for this, take your thumbs. This flap on the inside of your ears is called the tragus. Take your thumbs on the inside of that flap and just gently rub them up and down. There's no need to be aggressive. There's no need to be rough with this. If it feels safe and comfortable, you could close your eyes down. But if you're not inclined to do that or it doesn't feel safe, just leave them open. Right. So there are lots of points for the vagus nerve in the ears, and this tragus is one such point. And now I'd like you to maintain that function, but also take your index fingers behind your ears. And as you rub the tragus with your thumbs, rub the flesh on the backs of your ears with your index fingers. Hmm. And you can transition if you like, index finger, middle finger, both hands behind the ears. Just trace the flesh on the back of the ears from the top down to the lobe and then back up again. And if that feels good, you don't have to change anything, friends. You can keep doing that. Or take index finger of both hands, put them in the concha of the ear, and just start tracing all the little grooves and crevices in your ear. So the nice thing about these vagus nerve hacks, these parasympathetic nervous system hacks, they don't cost anything and they don't take a lot of time. So it's a pretty minimal investment on our part, and we can quite profoundly impact our autonomic nervous system. So the last two practices I'm going to share with you are both breath practices. So as you may know, I'm a certified breath coach. I'm also a John Paul Creamy certified breathwork facilitator. And breath, I've been continually blown away in my life, in the lives of the people that I work with, how powerfully breath can impact them. So I would argue, with the exception of like intravenous drugs or something that we take in through the lungs, like anesthesia, we can impact our autonomic nervous system more quickly with the breath than we can in almost any other way. We can increase the impact the autonomic nervous system much more quickly with the breath than we can with, say, a cup of coffee. And then you can release there. And you can take index finger and middle finger of both hands and just trace down from your jawline down along the side of the neck to the collarbone, and then maybe use the thumbs to brush up. Again, not pressing hard. In fact, I'm going to stick with the thumbs on that path up and down. So the vagus nerve self-massage practice that we're doing right here, you probably want a little bit of privacy for this. And one of the breath practices, you could do this, you could do the vagus nerve self-massage and both breath practices anywhere. But for most of us, like we don't want to draw that kind of attention to ourselves. So this is something you might want a little bit of privacy for, but you could do this in your car, like on a lunch break, or before you go into work, or even after work, before you walk into the house at the end of the day. But one of the breath practices I'm going to show you, you could do anywhere. Nobody would ever know you were doing it. All right, friends. And you can, if that feels good, again, keep doing that, or we can move on to the next practice. So that's a really simple vagal toning practice. Do you guys feel a difference from that? Could you type in the chat box yes or no? And no is okay. Yeah, it's yummy for me as well, Sonia. Definitely. Yeah, Josh, me too. All right, guys, let's look at the second practice. And it's Brahmari breath. And I know some of you have done Brahmari breath before. Whether you've done it before or not is okay. So Brahmari is Sanskrit for black bees. So this is a black bees breath. So it's a humming sound that we make. So a friend of mine, one of my teachers, so one of Sonia's teacher trainers as well, actually described Brahmari in the best way that I've ever heard. He said it's like making the Om sound, but it's through your nose. So what I like you to focus on is a sense of vibration. And I'm going to give you what I'll tell you about Brahmari breath. It's really impactful. For me, in my body, it's really impactful. 3 breaths is enough for me to notice a significant difference. But we're going to do more, and I'm going to show you a couple different hand gestures. So you may find that you like some hand gestures and dislike others. That's okay. Interlace your hands to the base of your scalp with your elbows pointing forward. Find some length along your spinal column. So as you inhale, press down into your seat. And then exhale, release another cleansing breath, a ha sound through your mouth. Ha. Maintain that length in your spine. And then 3 times, I'm going to cue you to take in a deep, life affirming inhale. And as you exhale, make a humming sound through your nose for as long as you can make that sound. And then we'll do that a total of 3 times with the hands like this. So inhale, deep, deep inhale. Exhale, make that humming sound. Release your hands, friends. If it's comfortable for you, place your left hand on your heart, your right hand on your belly. We're going to do that same thing here. I'm going to cue you for each inhale, and then on your own, exhale that humming sound through your nose for as long as you can make that sound. Inhale. 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 Great job, friends. Take your pinky finger, place it on the temple, and then ring finger, middle finger, index finger along the side of the head. So in one straight line. And then use your thumbs to close the tragus off, that flap of flesh in the front of your ears. And then we'll do the same thing. I'll cue you for an inhale 3 times. Make that humming noise through your nose for as long as you can. Inhale. 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 Come back to a comfortable, natural breath. You can release your hands down to your lap. If your eyes are closed, you can leave them gently closed. I'd like you to feel for the residual vibratory effect from that breath. And depending how tuned in you are to your body right at this moment, you may still feel that sense of vibration. And you may not too, and either way is okay. Friends, gently blink your eyes open, taking in first the room that you're in, and then maybe the contents of the room, and then the other people with whom you're sharing both your physical room and the Zoom room. So curious, once again, did you guys notice a difference in the set state of your nervous system before and after that breath? And if you would type that in the chat box, yes or no. And again, either way is okay. This one for me is really impactful. It's pretty powerful. So the graphic, the picture here of this practitioner, she has more of a classical mudra for Brahmari breath, with fingers starting below her lip and coming up all the way to her eyes. So you can do that. Okay, Josh, yes, it was impactful. That's awesome. That's awesome. I love this one too. What I love about this practice, the one that we did last, that vagus nerve self massage, and the 4-8 breath that we have on tap next, they're technically really simple, right? You don't need a teacher to show you how to do these breaths ever again. You got it. Like we did it long enough that you got it. And again, with the Brahmari breath, 3 breaths is enough for me to notice a big difference in my nervous system. Right, so the last practice that I wanted to leave you with is a vagal toning practice that it's called a 4-8 relaxation breath. So it'll be, I'll cue you for an inhale through your nose for a count of 4, and I'll cue you to exhale through your mouth for a count of 8, making a ha sound. Now, you may choose to make an audible ha sound, or it may just be the quality of that ha. You know what that feels like. So we're going to do 10 rounds of this. So let's start with a cleansing breath again first. Inhale, press down into your seat, grow out of your heart and the crown of your head, lengthen along your spinal column, and then exhale through your mouth. And then inhale through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through your mouth, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale nose, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale mouth, ha sound, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Eyes are closed, body is relaxed, breath is natural. Great job, friends. That was a 4-8 autonomic nervous system down regulating breath. You can do this anywhere you want. And with practice, no one will ever know you're doing it. So once again, if you like, you can gently blink your eyes open, taking in first the room that you're in, and then maybe the objects in the room, and then the people with whom you're sharing your real physical space or maybe your Zoom space. All right, friends. So those were 3 vagal toning practices that you can replicate on your own. You don't need anyone's help to do that. If you do find that you would like some coaching on one or more of these techniques, or you want something for sympathetic nervous system activation, like a morning breath, reach out to me. I'll give you guys my contact information before we part company. But before we move on to a brief description of Next Level Human, do you guys have any questions, comments, observations from these practices? Sonia, the last one, the 4-8 breath, was the one that was most impactful for you? Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's a really powerful breath. So we use this. Sonia's practiced science of stretching, gravity yoga with me before. We use this during that practice. After an hour, I'm ready for bed. Ah, for Casey, the bee's breath with the closed ears. That was new to do it that way. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad you guys are leaving here with something new. That's new for you. All right, so I wanted to take just a couple minutes and tell you about this program that we have through Transformation Nation. It's called Next Level Human. And it's a 12-month program, and it's based on the habits of the ancient yogis. The habits themselves are not that complicated. There's sort of a superficial level that we can automate them that we could call successful, but each of them is deep and juicy too. So for if one habit is really impactful for someone, they can dig really deep into that. What we do is we have weekly group coaching calls. We share the best available science on habit evolution. We talk about one of those every meeting. Each member gets a one-on-one monthly coaching call with me. Unlimited access to Transformation Nation Yoga. That's 11 classes a week, yoga, meditation, and breath work. And in the interest of bringing their posse along, every member gets 2 guest passes per week for that as well. Monthly workshops. So every other month we alternate. I'll do a yoga workshop one month and then a wellness workshop the second month. So for example, in October, I did a rock the block workshop, talking about how to use a yoga block to elevate one's practice. This month we did a green smoothie workshop, so more of a wellness related. Members get a guest pass for those as well. We do monthly social events. Members get guest passes to those as well. And we have access to Kate Stillman's online Body Thrive curricula, which is awesome. She's an American, but like I'm continually blown away by how big she thinks and talks about both Ayurveda and yoga. And the last thing that I feel like we offer as part of this, like how can we know the right things to do to take care of ourselves and not do them, like consistently not do them? It's really hard when we're on our own. And we're often not coached on how to evolve our habits. So we share the best available science on human habit evolution, and we're members of a dynamic group. We have right now a small but growing and mighty community. When we have a win, one of our members have a win, we all celebrate that win together. If one of us falls, we can rally around, help pick each other up, dust each other off, get each other back on our feet. The sort of outcomes that people in this program, in programs like this, because our pilot program we're only 7 weeks in, reduce chronic systemic inflammation. I've shared with you my interest in chronic systemic inflammation. Improved quality and quantity of sleep. Rhythmic eating. So like in more contemporarily, we would call this intermittent fasting, but working toward a rhythmic eating regimen. Optimal body composition, the ability to live and move powerfully, improve quality of relationships. So many people have compression in their lives. They have too much in their schedule. They have too much going on in their lives. This program helps us to find more easeful living and reduce the compression in their lives. And really, the whole point is to get in rhythm with nature, with our circadian rhythms, and to thrive rather than survive. We're currently enrolling right now for our January 2022 cohort, and I did want to just mention, I just made the decision today and posted, but we're doing a gratitude sale the day after Thanksgiving, where people that enroll that schedule a strategy session that day and enroll that day, we'll enroll them at the pilot program rate, which is a savings of about 20%. All right, friends. So as I promised, it's been almost 50 minutes. I distinguished between stress, eustress, and distress. I described the activations of the 2 divisions of the autonomic nervous system. We talked about the effects of stress on the human physiology, and I shared 3 actionable practices that you can take off the mat, off the call, and start using immediately to organically regulate your autonomic nervous system. We had an opportunity for a question and answer session, and then I talked briefly about Next Level Human. If you'd like to connect with me further, you can find me online. You could find me on Facebook as Chris Bishop, but Chris Bishops, frankly, are a dime a dozen. Might be a little harder to find me. But if you find me under Transformation Nation Yoga, you can find me on both Facebook or Instagram. My email address is chris@transformationnationyogaandwellness.com, and my cell phone number is 281-728-3896. And that is what I had to share with you guys today. Thank you guys so much for making time. I know there's a million things you could have been doing on your Saturday, and it means a lot to me that you made time to spend some time with me here. Thanks again for joining us for our free public wellness talk Don't tell me to relax. Befriending and managing your nervous system. Hope you found some tidbits here that were useful. If you've got feedback, either ways that we can improve the quality of experiences like this, or if there was something that really landed for you and you're inclined to share it, I would love to hear it. You can email me. I had a contact screen up there in the presentation, but my email address is chris at transformationnationyogaandwellness.com. You can message me through either Facebook or Instagram at Transformation Nation Yoga, or text me at US number 281 728 3896. Thanks again for joining us, friends.